Greetings. Thank you guys for tuning in. I trust that you're glad to see me, so I'm glad to see you. So, the title of this video may seem somewhat pessimistic or negative in tone, and I want to be very forthright about explaining this. Okay, so my intention is not to be negative or pessimistic, right? Now, I've been reflecting on some of my life experiences, and I've come to some startling realizations. And they are realizations that I think are representative of similar thoughts and opinions of people in my same position or a similar position. That is, especially people of my age group, because there is a certain phenomenon that exists, at least in the United States, I think, where there's this huge disconnect between schooling and real life. And what I mean by that is that there are many things that we're taught and trained to do in school that are supposedly supposed to help and equip and aid us in entering into the real world and being quote successful, or just living I guess a decent quality of life. And yet that doesn't seem to be the case. Like, it seems like a lot of the things which were taught in school, at least to me, were just straight up wrong. And like, for example, I'll use this. A lot of us are urged and encouraged to follow a very standard and conventional path. We're told to go to school, behave, make good grades, get in some extracurricular activities, do well on your standardized tests, graduate, go to college, network with people, try to get an internship, graduate, land a good job, and you'll be, quote, successful, right? And who are the people who define success in this case? The very same people who are supposedly training you to be successful. And I just think that this is a very narrow conception of education. Like, the way that we frame this entire dilemma of educating people through this institutionalized system is just wrong. And so I mentioned that there were several things that were taught to me which were just downright wrong. But I think that pales in comparison to something else. What was not taught to me. So I'm struggling to understand why we didn't spend more time talking about personal finances, or how our economic and civic legislative systems work, or just something as simple as taxes, just like real life stuff that you need to go out and be functional in this modern world. Things that just are not taught and emphasized in school. Like, I'm struggling to understand why there's this massive disconnect, this dichotomy between what gets presented and what actually is. And now, before we proceed, I do need to give a disclaimer, because I get that I am very blessed and privileged in the sense that I've lived in the United States my entire life. And I have been afforded and entitled to a quality of education that many people don't get. And in addition to that, I actually had a lot of supportive people, especially great teachers, who inspired and actually did help to train and equip me to be an independent and free thinker. And so I do want to say there is a slither of hope for myself, as well as I'm sure many other people in that regard. But nonetheless, I still think that there's a lot of things that we need to change about our education system, or the way that we conceive of education. And everything that I've mentioned up until this point sort of indicates that there's a problem with the way that government or institutions conduct education. Like, maybe there's a problem with curriculums, and I get that varies from state to state. I don't know. I mean, I can't say that I know in a definite sense, but what I do understand is this: the process of schooling is not exactly the same as education. And I think that a lot of people think that they are the same. So just because you're schooled, just because you have a lot of schooling, doesn't mean that you're well educated. Now, it could be the case that there is correlation between the two. I do certainly think that there is generally a causal relationship between the two, but it would be a gross mistake to say or even imply that schooling is the same as education. because schooling can have a tendency to devolve into indoctrination, which I think I have somewhat demonstrated that point so far, right? Education, on the other hand, is really what enables us to think critically, to examine propositions and discern whether they're true or false, and on what basis they're true or false. And so, while I think that perhaps there may be a problem with our institutions or just, the way that government prescribes education to us, I think that there's also a problem with our culture, because it seems like, at least from what I'm seeing and what I've been experiencing, like we have really embraced and glamorized being dumb and being proud of being dumb and praising stupid behavior in the name of entertainment and in the name of pleasure. And people call it cute and people call it funny, but really it's scary. I mean, it's really concerning. Like, when you consider the implications of a populace that does not have a great education, a great quality of education, think about what that says for communities or for government or for democracy, right? One of the quotes that, I don't know who said this, but one of the quotes that I really like about democracy is, education is the maintenance of democracy. And so if we compromise education, if we compromise our quality of education, we compromise democracy, we compromise freedom and independence and being able to openly think and enlarge our understanding and our conception of things. Because if we're relying on government, or if we're just going to like blindly acquiesce or conform to the notions of popular culture, the standards of popular culture, of what is expected of us to do, and we're encouraged to do, if we're gonna do that, then heck, we might we might as well put handcuffs on ourselves and walk into a prison, because that's what you do when you compromise education, is you compromise your ability to freely choose and examine your life. And to echo Socrates, I'll say the unexamined life is not worth living. Okay? So another thing about the conception that we have of education that I think is deeply flawed is that we treat it as a means to an end. So a lot of people are encouraged to pursue higher education solely for the sake of improving their social and economic status. And that in itself is not a bad thing, and I don't want to imply that it is. In fact, I would be a hypocrite if I were to say it was a bad thing, because I took advantage of that very same maxim in my own personal life. However, I think we greatly devalue education if we don't treat it as an end in itself, because ultimately, education is the thing that enables us, again, to critically examine the world and to think well, right? And it is something that should enrich us and embolden us and inspire us and help us to cultivate the ideas and the knowledge and the beliefs that are necessary to formulating a purpose in life. And I think that that is something that's super lacking in this era in which we live, is that there's a lot of purposeless people living right now. There's a lot of people who are addicted. Like, there's a lot of people who suffer with mental health. There's a lot of people who just are lost. And we have normalized that. Like, people in my generation, the statistics for depression and anxiety and just all this, like a social media addiction, pornography addiction, video game addiction, like all of this stuff, like this is not a healthy society. And I think it stems from a lack of education and a compromise of education. And I know that may sound a bit absurd to some people to say that education is the answer, but I don't know, man. Our people suffer for a lack of knowledge. I don't think that that is in any sense an understatement. Now, I've pointed out some really negative things, right? And again, wasn't my intention to be pessimistic or negative. That's not why I made this video. It doesn't really do us any good to point out problems without being prepared to propose a solution. I can't pretend that I am some genius mastermind who knows the answers to how to solve these macro problems, right? I do have a few things to say, though. Well, actually, just maybe one thing to say on education. One last thing. I'll put it this way. when we're children, we rely on the guidance and the mentorship and the instruction of other people. But once we mature and we become of a certain age, once we become adults, it then becomes our personal responsibility to educate ourselves. And so, sadly, our education system has not encouraged people and instilled within people the importance of being a lifelong learner and having a genuine joy towards learning and self-study. Yet, one of the things that I find is really popular in our society today is physical fitness, right? And I think that this will be a really good comparison here. So, a lot of people, and I think that physical fitness is a great thing, by the way. Like, we should all strive to be physically fit. A lot of people stress the importance of eating a good diet to be physically fit, or going to the gym routinely to be physically fit, or taking up some sort of athletic hobby to be physically fit or to be strong, right? It's the same thing with the mind. We have to make an effort to exercise our minds, but yet that doesn't seem to be as glamorous or popular of an idea in our society. And so I want to encourage and inspire everyone watching this video right now. Take the opportunity to train your mind to think, to educate yourself in your free time. Now, what that looks like, I don't know. One of my best recommendations, one thing that I will stand by till the day I die, is read books. Read a lot of books. Read books that you don't necessarily agree with, and read books with a critical point of view, also an open-minded point of view. But the reason I say that is because literature is one of the most powerful things at our disposal as human beings. There are many people who have lived throughout this world, and fortunately, we live in a time where information is like crazy accessible, and I don't think most of us grasp how important that is or how big a deal that is, right? Like, we can read the works of people who lived thousands of years ago, right? So I'm saying all that to say, there's a lot of wisdom, there's a lot of knowledge, there's a lot of experience that we can learn from others, right? And you don't have to accept all of it. That's one of the reasons why I kind of mentioned, firstly, read books you don't agree with, is because you can take certain parts and discard the rest. All right, like, that's a part of formulating and synthesizing knowledge, right? It's like the input and output of ideas. It's like a reciprocal nature of learning. As abstract as that may sound, I feel like that's pretty descriptive of the process of education. Whereas the process of indoctrination is like somebody pouring water into a bucket, where the pourer represents a teacher and the water represents knowledge and the bucket represents you or your mind. And what does that water do when it enters the bucket? It just sits there, stagnates, right? Education is not quite the same. Education is kind of like a body of water that has an outlet but also is fed by another channel or river or something. Like, it's very, it flows. I don't know, that's probably a terrible example, but I think you all get my point. Please, I think that, the emphasis on personal responsibility and educating ourselves and engaging with each other, having conversations and having these open dialogues in which we can sort of converge and find some semblance of truth and just stability. Like, we need that more than ever right now. So anyways, yeah, I thank you guys for tuning in again. I appreciate you as always. If you have any questions, critiques, comments, etc., please leave those down in the comment section below. If you liked the video, like it. If you disliked it, dislike it. And yeah, until next time, bye bye.